In Still Rising, you play as the sentient automat dancer in service of the Queen. You'll be tasked with hacking and slashing and shooting automats to save French historical figures all over Paris as you try to overthrow the Tyrant King. There are 4 classes in Still Rising. Here are their strengths, weaknesses, and playstyles for all 4, and I'll help you pick one of them. Let's go. Let me know in the comments down below your favorite class, what class you're going to pick in Still Rising. Before we get into these specific classes, just a couple of things. As far as I know, you can't reset your attributes in the game. I may have missed it, but that's just how it goes when you play games pre-release. You can't Google things, but I don't think you can reset your attributes. So once you're locked into these choices, you won't be able to change them. And you can actually find a lot of these weapons and things that you get from these different classes just in the game itself. So you're not locked into like, a unique weapon from one of these classes, just the stats themselves that you're locked into. We'll start with the Bodyguard. Now, the Bodyguard relies on their strength to withstand hits and deal heavy physical damage to their enemies. This class starts out with the Body of Work, which is a heavy power weapon. Power is one of the attributes. Power, agility, and elemental alchemy are the 3 weapon scaling attributes. So power is like strength. Let's say it's strength, right? In other kind of Souls-like games. This is a slow tank style class. Now, you start out with durability +3 and engineering +2. So realistically, you don't start out in any particular direction in terms of your weapon scaling. You start out with that durability, which increases your total health, and engineering, which increases your armor, affliction multiplier, and loot multiplier. So really, these is like health and armor and a big, heavy, brooding weapon. So you'll play very slow, using a lot of heavy charge attacks. Now, this class and the soldier class we're going to talk about shortly are similar in a way, so there's a little bit of crossover here. But when the Bodyguard with the Body of Work, you'll be blocking attacks with its special moves and then following up with normal attacks. Now, with this class, you're probably not going to do a whole lot of light attacks because of how slow those animations are. Enemies move much quicker in this game than you do by doing those slow attacks. So you're probably going to be charging up those heavy charge attacks, which will do impact damage. Impact damage is attacks that stagger enemies by knocking them back or just completely knocking them over. Now, as you charge up a heavy attack, you'll do more impact damage, which will eventually knock enemies down or push them away from you, which is why you'll be using something like this and trying to focusing on that aspect of the kit and preventing damage from coming to you by either staggering the enemies, interrupting their attacks, pushing them away, that kind of thing. And it fits better in a power line because the Body of Work is a power weapon. Now, there are other heavy power weapons like the wheels that you can get a little bit later. There's a lot of flexibility in that heavy style, but really this is a slow, brooding, tanky kind of class. The soldier is next, and these are strong fighters that can wield heavy weapons to perform powerful physical attacks. I would ignore the heavy weapon note in the speech there because they don't actually really wield heavy weapons. They wield medium weight weapons, but they fit in the power class, same as the Bodyguard. Now, you start out with the Halberd, which is an interesting weapon that kind of acts a little bit like a lance. Like you've got like long range attacks that you can do. So you've got a bit of distance, you can keep away from the enemies. It also has the unique special move where you actually shoot out of it. So you get a little bit of offensive range potential there as well. Now, how I said this is similar to the Bodyguard is they both have power weapons. That the soldier has a medium weight power weapon compared to the Bodyguard being heavy. That just affects like your attack, animation, speeds, that kind of thing, and the impact damage. But for the soldier, it's a medium weight, but you actually have stats into power and vigor. So power increases your stats with power scaling weapons, and vigor increases your endurance essentially. So that's the 2 main things that you get with this class. That's why it's a little bit more offensive focused than the Bodyguard. So if you're looking to do like a strength/power kind of build, it'll either be the Bodyguard or the soldier, and then defensive or offensive is how you can go. The soldier has a bit of choice, a bit more than the Bodyguard if you're going like a heavy route, because there's a lot of flexibility in the medium weight weapons. You start out with the Halberd as an option. There's also things like the dual swords, which scale with power and agility, and then you've also got the chains, which scale with power primarily, and you can get like elemental effects on them and things like that as well. So a lot of flexibility for the soldier. I think it's a really solid starting class, definitely a better starting weapon than the Bodyguard because you do have a bit more speed. You can still do that slow, heavy charge attacks like you can with the Bodyguard, but overall, I think you've got a bit more offensive potential here. You don't have to worry too much about the lack of defenses. You can just pop a couple of points in durability and you'll be fine. The Dancer is the next class, and this is a highly resistant class that can chain attacks together in quick succession to immobilize enemies and inflict critical hits. Now, first we'll talk about what immobilization is, just to cover that. Now, we've already talked about impact. The converse to that is immobilization. Now, when you lock onto a target, you'll see the diamond effect on them. If you fill that bar, that will immobilize the target, essentially like breaking their stance. You can then follow up with a critical hit, which will do immense damage, especially if you invest in your critical hit multiplier. It's the only way you can do critical hits in this game. game, and agility weapons typically will scale with immobilization and physical damage, whereas the power weapons will scale with physical damage and impact. So that's kind of the difference there. These are very agile, fast kind of classes, especially with the starting out with the armored fans. This is a very short range weapon that will have quick attack combos that you can kind of combo together very easily. You do start out with 3+ agility, so you've got a little bit of that scaling for agility, as well as 2 vigor for your endurance, which is absolutely perfect for this class because you'll often be dodging some of that damage coming towards you rather than, say, the soldier, where you might be staggering enemies away to prevent their attacks, or the bodyguard, where you'd be blocking. In this kind of class, you can block, but I wouldn't really recommend it. You're probably going to be dodging a bit more than you would, say, blocking. Similar to the soldier, there's a lot of flexibility in your weapon choices here if you're going the agility line. You've got the claws, which are similar to fans, a little bit more range, but quicker attacks and some slightly more interesting special moves. You've got the dual swords as well, which actually I found my favorite weapon in the dual swords are the fire and ice. When you counter attack, you deal frost and fire damage to the target, so you can set them on fire as well as freeze them at the same time. It's a really cool weapon, but there's a lot of flexibility in the dancer line that you can play around with, and it's a really solid option for a dodge focused, fast, agile kind of build playstyle. Alchemist is our last class on this list. The Alchemists favor alchemical weapons that can ignite, freeze, or electrocute their enemies and cause persistent elemental afflictions. Now, these afflictions are like your status effects in Steel Rising. So you've got frost, fire, and lightning, or fulmination as they call it in this game. Now, they all do various different things. We talk about that in the tips video. Go watch that if you're more interested in that kind of stuff. But this will focus on using the batons or the tonfa kind of weapons, and you will be applying these status effects to the weapon and then attacking enemies with them, and then you'll deal those status effects to them and apply them to the targets to deal those effects. Now, the downside for this class primarily is that you will come across enemies that have high resistances to your alchemical type. Say you start out with a frost weapon, and if you're fighting a frost enemy, they're going to be pretty resistant to that damage type, right? So it will have some weaknesses, and you can kind of minimize that with trying to use, say, a fire and a frost weapon, because you have 2 weapon slots, but it's just something to be notice of. This class does start out with 3 alchemical alchemy, which is your main scaling for these kind of weapons, N+2 in engineering, which increases your armor, your loot multiplier, but the main thing here is your affliction multiplier, because we'll be applying those afflictions, those elemental afflictions, to these targets with these kind of weapons. Now, the downside of the Alchemist in terms of its weapon flexibility is you've really only got the tonfas. There are some weapons in these other classes, like, say, the heavier weapons, like the power weapons, or some of the dancer's weapons, that will have a special move that'll add one of these elemental afflictions to them. But if you're not investing in either the agility or the power line, they're not going to be as useful for you. The batons are really the only main weapons, other than like the muskets that you get, which aren't super flexible, and there's only a couple of them in the game. They're not really a unique weapon that you will get a lot of. So it's a good class as a whole, I think, and it's fun because of how different it is to the other 3. Like, you want to try something really unique and different. And also, if you're maybe not sure whether you want to go a power or an agility line, you're not sure exactly, you could pick this class, and then, say, if you find a power weapon like the fire chain, for example, that has fire on it, and you really like that, and it stacks with power and the elemental alchemy, you can simply just buff your power stat, and then you can use that weapon and use it to relatively good effectiveness. So there is flexibility in this class. I think it's really solid. It's just maybe one of the more slightly advanced classes, I would say. Which class would you pick as a whole? I really think it comes down to either the soldier or the dancer, just as a base level, you know, other than some of the more different ones. I think the bodyguard and the alchemist are the 2 vastly different classes at either end of the scale, and the soldier and the dancer are the kind of in the middle ones, where you've got flexibility to try some really different things without being too invested into one specific kind of line. The dancer in the more agile line, and the soldier in the more power line, I would say. You've got a lot of flexibility there. But those are my options. Let me know in the comments down below what you think of these classes as a whole, which ones you would pick. Thank you for watching this video till the end. Thank you to our members for supporting the channel. My name is Norza, and I hope you have a great day.